You're listening to the Voice with Action podcast. I am your host, Deb Balico.
And I am Rebecca Pratt, co-founder and president of Orphan Relief and Rescue. Tune in to be awakened and inspired to take action towards what you were created to do in this world, to live fully alive.
Hi, and welcome everyone to the Voice with Action podcast. This is our very first live stream, and we are excited that you're here. And just to jump into this podcast, and I want to introduce myself. My name is Deb Balico. I am the communications and event manager for Orphan Relief and Rescue, and I'm here with Rebecca Pratt, who is the co-founder and president of Orphan Relief and Rescue. So we are choosing to do this live stream on Giving Tuesday because it is a global day of giving that takes place on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving in the United States. And the whole purpose of Giving Tuesday is to encourage people and organizations to donate their time or money to charitable causes. So if you're not familiar with Orphan Relief and Rescue, we operate in rural villages where parents traffic their children due to hunger. We've successfully rescued hundreds of kids from child labor, abuse, and early marriage by enrolling them in our school and feeding program. We also support parents through our savings and loan program to help them start businesses to provide for their families. So a little background on Rebecca and I, in case you don't know, we've known each other for 20 years now, which is amazing. We met volunteering together on mercy ships, and I had the privilege of being with Rebecca when the Lord began to burden her heart for dying children in Africa. And the Lord, seeing and observing, how the Lord has been unpacking this burden for her, putting it on her heart, and ultimately bringing about the existence of Orphan Relief and Rescue to provide for these dying children. So it's interesting because Rebecca was just sharing with me how when she goes to speaking engagements, people often ask her the same question. And they say, how do you know what to do when you have a heart to help others, but you're not sure what you should do about it? And you think God has something big for you to do, but you just don't know where to start. So Rebecca, God had something huge for you to do for these dying children in Africa. So where did you start?
Yeah, for me, I wasn't looking for something big, but I always tell people, when they come to me with that question, is that if you are asking God to show you what he wants you to do to help others, he'll definitely guide and direct you. You will not miss what he has for you. And he always wants to use your life to bless others. And every day, God wants to be an extension of his hands and feet here on earth. And he'll show you daily by putting someone on your heart to extend an act of kindness to. When someone comes to mind, I always encourage people to take action on those little burdens that come to your thoughts. And, someone may need just a word of encouragement or a practical need that you have the ability to meet. Many of us are already doing that on a daily basis. So it's not that complicated. And then, slowly as we're extending acts of kindness in different forms, then God starts to give us a little bit of a bigger burden and a bigger task. And God is just, honestly, I feel like God's testing us a lot of times and wanting us to get familiar with listening to these promptings from his Holy Spirit. And then as we take these little actions, he slowly shows us the bigger picture of what he wants us to walk in. And personally, this has been a process of learning to hear God's voice a lot more clearly as I take action on these different promptings. And so you'll hear a lot about this in our future podcast episodes and talking about those promptings and how to recognize if it's God's voice or not. And, even now, it's still uncomfortable as God prompts my heart to do certain things because it's usually for strangers that I don't know as well. And I've learned that in all of these promptings that God is trustworthy. And as we take small actions towards what we feel God is saying, I personally am never disappointed in what God does. And in the early days of working in Africa, reading the Bible regularly, even now, makes me realize God's character, and it gives me confidence to know that God is always working to rescue, redeem, and to restore. He first starts by doing this in our own life, And then he works to utilize our life to help bring healing to others as an extension of his love for everyone in our path and abroad. So you're going to hear me talk regularly about the fact that the reason God prompts our heart to take action on something is because he's choosing to use our lives to accomplish his perfect will here on earth. And he's giving us the opportunity to partner with him to bring his kingdom to come and his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, as it says in Matthew 6:10. So one of the stories I'm going to share is from the early days that God taught me a lot about this. Orphan Relief and Rescue was not in existence yet, but living in West Africa with my family on a hospital ship with the organization called Mercy Ships that Deb had just described, God was regularly trying to get my attention as to what he was wanting me to see and to act upon outside of my normal job description within Mercy Ships. So one of these times happened when I was walking around an orphanage where kids were very sickly and at death's door, and God challenged my heart on a few things. As a favor to one of my coworkers, I agreed to go check on one of the orphanages where kids had not eaten for 3 days and to drop off food that I had received from a large donation. And we had stored that food for an occasion specifically like this. And so with a busy workload, I was determined to only drop off food and to not get emotionally involved. We were just going to bless these children and make sure that they were taken care of. And so, of course, when my friends and I showed up with a whole Land Rover of food, it was an incredible, miraculous thing. The children and the workers were so excited at the sight of this food. They ran around the food and they were just crying and, just literally rejoicing and singing. And it was literally like a Christmas scene to me. It was as if we were bringing Christmas presents here in America to kids. And it was just precious. The orphanage director, who has a strong faith in God, just said, "Oh, we should never doubt God taking care of us. Never, ever doubt God. This is a true miracle." And she just kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And, for me, my eyes were roaming around, looking at their living conditions. I saw they were in need of so much proper sanitation. They had no adequate toilets or showers. Their well had been destroyed by a civil war. They had no drinkable water. Their sleeping quarters were terrible. The children were sleeping on mattresses on the floor that were moldy due to rain leaking in on their main room, which had no roof. The facility they were living in was unbelievable. And I just literally could not even fathom children living here. So at the same time, I was trying to look at this objectively, not emotionally, because I was determined to not get involved emotionally. And I was like, I don't have time to do an extra project. We had just finished a big orphanage project in a neighboring country that we had just sailed from. And so I do have a strong love for orphan children, and I didn't, want to ignore what I was seeing. But at the same time, I was trying to be practical in what I could actually handle personally. So walking around, I still was, just kind of keeping my mind honestly closed to the future part of it until I picked up a little girl. And her name, I'm calling her Gifty just to protect her identity. She was about 3 years old and had scabies, fungus, and staph infections all over her skin. And I looked around at all the other kids and realized they have the same skin ailments that this little one had that I was holding. And I knew that this could be easily treated with a $2 medicine because I had just dealt with that with similar health issues of the kids in the former orphanage that I had just helped in the neighboring country. And, it's not an expensive remedy to bring relief to all these children. At that orphanage, there was 80 kids. And I thought, okay, 80 times 2, that's $160 to treat them all. And then looking around at the malnourished children, I just thought, oh my gosh, and this little one in my arms, as I'm looking at her, all of a sudden just God hit me with something that I did not expect. And the thought literally came to mind, what if these were my biological children and I was dead? What if someone with came with the power to relieve their pain, walked by, seen my baby suffering like this, yet chose to do nothing? I thought, if this was my kid in my arms and this woman was holding my child and did nothing to help her, I, if possible, would cry from my grave, shame on you for not helping my babies. And as this thought came to me, tears welled up in my eyes, and I felt like God spoke to my heart about the future and the destiny that he had for this little Gifty in my arms and for each of the other children who are equally precious and dear in his heart. And I looked next to me as I was walking, and sitting close to me were 3 other very sick little ones. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, they looked so lethargic and weak, and their skin was the worst I had ever seen. They were the worst ones of all the kids. They had actually a deep black fungus that was covering their little bodies. And I felt my heart just completely break for them. And I knew that God was prompting me to get involved in this orphanage home and these kids' lives, just like a mother would. And he wanted me to be more he wanted, honestly, this to be more than just a food delivery. And that evening I went back to the ship. I was struggling with the idea of getting involved. I was counting the cost, my time, the money that I would need to raise, and the emotional energy that this would take. And I knew I had to just have some time alone with God. And so the next day it was a weekend. So I took some time just spending time alone. I read some scriptures and just prayed. And then I thought, oh, well, I am going to just call other organizations similar to what I did in the neighboring country next to me. I thought, surely here, it's post a civil war, and there's tons of organizations. I mean, more than I'd ever seen in a country before. And I thought, surely I will find somebody that can help these dying kids. So I did what I did before, and I called all these different organizations, and I got a no with each phone call. And I literally could not find anyone who was willing to take the risk on helping these kids. They did caution me to do my research to make sure the orphanage director was not corrupt, which I did do. And I did thoroughly investigate her and found her to be a credible orphanage director. Everyone who knew her or of her had vouched for her to be a very honest, amazing individual who just really did love kids and loved God and wanted to do the best for these kids. And, what we have seen is that there are many orphanage directors that I can honestly tell you horrific stories about that are corrupt and abusive, using the kids on every level for personal gain. And they do prey on people in the West, on their emotions, to get them to give lots of money. And, so I am extremely cautious in who we do help. But this woman was not in that category, which I was thankful for. But after seeing this home and, just really not being able to find anyone to help, I continued to just really seek the Lord on this. I didn't want to make a hasty decision because I knew the cost. And I started listening to a CD that Rick Warren, author of Purpose Driven Life, spoke on. And these words pierced my heart as I was listening. And he said, when God gives you a burden, don't ignore it, feed it, and let it break your heart, because that's God's heart. Don't stuff it or ignore those burdens. And as I listened, tears welled up in my eyes, and I knew again what God was asking. So these children, shockingly, became my burden, which was actually God's burden that he put into my heart. And then I just rallied other friends and coworkers who had a heart to help as well. And they joined in this side mission as well. And so weekends and evenings, consisted of going. A coworker named Matt LePage took the lead for literally renovating this entire home. And, raising money was my job, to raise as much as I could with friends back home. And it became a beautiful team effort to help these precious children. And it was incredible to see God come through with provision of finances, resources, and just beautiful friendships were formed through this partnership in helping these kids. And, because of the generosity of so many, these children literally got a new lease on life. They were given a new well, new showers, toilets, a new roof, plastered walls, bunk beds, as well as new flooring. And then a year later, we came back as Orphan Relief and Rescue, and we were able to add a school building on the back of the home, a large boys' dormitory, a security fence, more latrines, toilets, showers, many bunk beds, mosquito nets. We were literally able to also help them with small businesses. And we started a child development program to help the children to just be able to be raised as healthy and whole adults. And at the end of all the construction part of the project, when we were still in that country under mercy ships, on a weekend, we invited the government social welfare office workers to come and walk through the home and just literally give us their stamp of approval on this home and certify it as a credible, healthy home. And as they walked around, they just kept saying, "Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. We have never seen such a beautiful home like this that's not run by a non-governmental organization." And they said, "This is the second best orphanage home in the entire country that's not run by a big non-governmental organization." And so at that time, the social welfare workers just pleaded with me to please don't leave their country and forget about all these other needy children and homes with equally terrible conditions. And, those conversations are really what haunted me and the faces of these precious kids. When we did come back to America, our family's stint on the ship was up. And so for the next 6 months, it was sleeplessness, and it was not easy to, for me personally, I just wanted kind of normal life again. And so I was excited about coming back to America. I started real estate school. I was going to become a realtor. I didn't want to be struggling financially with, raising support anymore. And we had been with Mercy Ships for 8 years. So that was just, it was a hard thing. But, in these sleepless nights, it was clear that if we were going to start an organization, which the name Orphan Relief and Rescue came to mind, if that was going to come into existence, it would be an organization that was formulated specifically to help the children that no one else was helping, and would help the children in the most appalling, complicated circumstances, who would most likely die or who would suffer greatly without intervention. There's many wonderful orphan ministries and organizations out there. And honestly, I really just wanted to hand these needy children and situations off to those who are the professionals in this type of work. I love what they all do. It's incredible, and their hearts are huge. But the children who were truly dying in my path and who were in the most complicated situations were not ones that I could find anyone else to help. So therefore, Orphan Relief and Rescue was founded to specifically help the children that will not be helped by anyone else. And if you want more of this story of the beginning, formulating those first years, you can read more of that in my book of Inspired to Action, how following the promptings of your heart can change the world. And, my challenge to you today is to not ignore the burdens that you're feeling. Don't stuff these feelings, feed it, and let it break your heart. Let that burden break your heart, because that is God's heart. You don't have to do something big. You can start with little things you feel God's asking of you. Extend an act of kindness towards what that burden might be and see what God might do with it. For me in Africa, it really began with simply feeding hungry children. And then God started to prompt me with a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Here in America, sometimes this prompting happens when I'm on an airplane, sitting next to someone who is hurting and telling me their difficulty in life. This is my chance to pray for them and give them a word of encouragement that I feel prompted by the Lord to do, to be an extension of Jesus to them. Start with a burden that's right in front of you.
Yeah, Rebecca, I really love how you because I think a lot of people can feel overwhelmed with, oh my goodness, it seems so huge. Where do I even start? And how you're saying just start small. And,
Yeah.
It really is ultimately God's burden. And He's inviting us to be a part of how He wants to solve and do what He wants to do. And it's an invitation of intimacy with God. And so if we just respond with these little tiny things, then He's the one that will ultimately carry out His plan. And we just have to walk in obedience. So it's one little step at a time, because I know I've heard you say multiple times, if God had shown you like how big Orphan Relief and Rescue got from the beginning, you would have been overwhelmed. You would have run away. And
Yes.
instead, He had to show you one step at a time. So would you agree that that's kind of how you would encourage people at this moment? If it seems too big, what would you say to them?
Yeah, let's not look at the big picture. I can't look at the big picture. I get too scared, honestly. I get fearful of even the problems of like a whole orphanage of all these kids. So what I do is I compartmentalize it. Okay, well, we can get medicine for $160 and treat all these kids and at least help them with their skin. And okay, we can drop off food. So yeah, here in America, I don't look at the big picture problems. I literally say, can I feed or can I fill this certain need in front of me? And if it's making a meal for somebody who's sick or praying for somebody or, different acts of kindness that God will prompt me to do, I just walk in that, and God sometimes births some bigger things with those things.
Yeah. Well, so remember that when God, the quote that you shared when you were listening to the Rick Warren CD, you said, when God gives you a burden, don't ignore it, feed it, and let it break your heart, because that's God's heart. Don't stuff or ignore those burdens. So that's our encouragement to you today, is don't stuff or ignore those burdens. And so if you would like to partner with us at Orphan Relief and Rescue and what we're doing, and then continue to listen to this podcast, continue to share these stories, you could become a monthly recurring donor at $50 a month. What that does is that provides 2 meals a day. It puts kids into our school and feeding program and puts their parents in our savings and loan program. So that's $600 a year. And we've just recently added 35 more kids. We currently have 175 kids in that program. We've added 35 more. So if you would like to partner with us and join us in this endeavor to grow and what the Lord is doing to really, truly end child slavery in these rural communities that we work in West Africa, you can visit us at orphanreliefandrescue.org. Is there anything else, Rebecca, you wanted to say?
That is great. I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining, and happy Givey Tuesday, and happy holidays coming up, and Merry Christmas to you all. Thank you for listening to the Voice with Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you consider sharing or subscribing to this podcast and leave a 5-star review to help us grow? If you want to reach us or help us end child trafficking in West Africa, go to orphanreliefandrescue.org. That's orphanreliefandrescue.org. See you next week.